My name is Linda Parker, and I'm 64 years old. I spent 38 years working, saving, and sacrificing so that one day I could finally retire with enough money to live the peaceful life I had always dreamed of. I thought my husband would be beside me when that day came. I thought we would travel, sleep late, enjoy our home, and finally live without worrying about work. But 3 months after I retired, I discovered something that completely changed the way I saw the man I had been married to for 35 years. My husband had secretly moved hundreds of thousands of dollars from my retirement savings, and he wasn't investing it for our future. He was using my money to build a completely different future with another woman. And the worst part, he thought I would never find out. I still remember the day I walked out of the hospital for the last time. I had worked there for 38 years, and when I stepped outside that afternoon, I stood beside my car for a few seconds and just stared at the building. I could hardly believe it was finally over. For decades, I had woken up early, rushed through breakfast, sat in traffic, dealt with angry patients, insurance companies, paperwork, supervisors, and endless deadlines. There were countless mornings when I wanted to stay in bed, but I always reminded myself that one day I would be able to stop. That day had finally arrived. I was 64 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, nobody was waiting for me to answer an email or finish a report. I was free. I had spent years putting money into my retirement accounts, and by the time I retired, my 401k pension rollover and personal savings connected to my retirement had grown to roughly $420,000. To someone else, that might have sounded like a big number. To me, it wasn't just a number. Every dollar represented a piece of my life. It represented mornings when I was exhausted, but still went to work. It represented overtime, skipped vacations, postponed dreams, and 38 years of telling myself that the sacrifice would be worth it someday. And now someday had finally arrived. My husband, Richard, was 67. He had retired from a manufacturing company several years earlier, so he knew exactly how important this moment was to me. When I came home that evening, he had prepared dinner. He opened a bottle of wine, smiled at me, and raised his glass. "To your retirement," he said. I smiled and raised mine. "To our retirement." He walked over, kissed my forehead, and said, "You've earned this, Linda." Those words made me feel safe. After 35 years of marriage, I believed I knew my husband. We had gone through everything together: mortgage payments, family problems, job changes, arguments, vacations, birthdays, illnesses, and all the ordinary struggles that come with building a life with someone. I had never imagined that the person standing across the table from me that night was already thinking about how to take control of the money I had spent my entire life earning. For the first few weeks, everything seemed perfect. I started sleeping later. I took long walks in the morning. I joined a book club. I spent more time gardening and visiting my sister Diane. I finally had time to do all the little things I had kept postponing for decades. Then Richard started talking about our finances. One morning, we were sitting at the kitchen table when he placed a folder in front of me. "Linda, we need to make a few changes." I looked at the folder. "What kind of changes?" "Nothing bad. Actually, it's the opposite. I think we can make our retirement money work harder for us." He told me he had spoken to a financial advisor named Mark. According to Richard, we were leaving too much money sitting in accounts that weren't earning enough. He said we needed a better strategy. He talked about diversification, taxes, investment growth, and protecting our future. I listened, but honestly, most of the financial terminology went over my head. I understood hospital administration. I understood budgets. I understood paperwork. But investing wasn't my area. Richard knew that. He leaned toward me and said, "You're retired now. We need to make this money last." I said, "I know." He smiled. "Then let me handle it." I laughed. "Since when are you good with paperwork?" "I don't have to be good at paperwork. That's what the advisor is for." It sounded reasonable. And because I trusted my husband, I didn't question him as much as I should have. A few weeks later, Richard brought several documents home. He told me they were standard forms to consolidate some of our accounts and move money into better investment options. I read what I could. Then I asked questions. Richard answered them confidently. I signed some of the documents. Looking back, that was the moment I gave him the opportunity he had been waiting for. I didn't think I was giving away control. I thought I was trusting my husband. There is a huge difference between those two things. Over the next couple of months, Richard became strangely protective of our finances. Whenever I asked about an account, he would tell me it was being processed. When I asked about a statement, he said the advisor had it. When I asked why certain documents hadn't arrived, he told me not to worry. At first, I let it go. I was enjoying retirement. Then one morning, I received an email notification from one of my financial accounts. I almost ignored it, but something made me open it. I logged in and stared at the balance. It was lower than I expected, much lower. There had been a large withdrawal. I immediately called Richard. "Did you move money from my account?" He didn't sound surprised. "Yes." "How much?" "It's part of the investment plan." "Why didn't you tell me?" He sighed. "Linda, I was going to tell you." "When?" "Eventually." That answer bothered me. I asked him where the money had gone. He became irritated. "Why are you questioning every little thing?" "It's not a little thing, Richard. That's my retirement money." He paused. Then he said something that I would never forget. "We're married. You don't have to know every detail." I didn't argue. I simply said, "Okay." But something inside me had changed. For the first time in 35 years, I felt like I was being treated as a passenger in my own life. A few days later, another statement arrived. Richard grabbed it before I could open it. "What is that?" I asked. "Nothing important." "Can I see it?" He smiled. "Linda, you're retired. You should be relaxing." I watched him walk away with the statement in his hand. That evening, I barely slept. Something was wrong. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew something was wrong. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse Richard. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to tell him what I suspected. I was going to find out the truth first. I requested copies of my financial statements and transaction histories. I wanted everything in writing. I wanted original records, not summaries. I wanted to know exactly where every dollar had gone. Then I called the financial institution directly. The representative asked me several security questions. After verifying my identity, she told me there had been multiple transfers. I asked where the money had gone. She gave me the information she was allowed to provide. I wrote it down. Then I sat there staring at my notebook. The receiving account wasn't my personal account. It wasn't our joint account. It wasn't an investment account I recognized. It was connected to a company. The name of the company was Parker Financial Solutions. Parker was my last name, but I had never heard of it. I searched through our home documents. Nothing. I searched the state business registry, and there it was, a company registered only a few months earlier. The owner was Richard Parker, my husband. I sat completely still. Richard had created a company without telling me. Money from my retirement account had been transferred into an account connected to that company. And suddenly, every strange thing he had said over the past few months started making sense. I called my sister, Diane. We met at a coffee shop that afternoon. I placed the documents in front of her. She read them carefully. Then she looked at me. "Linda, are you sure about this?" "I wish I wasn't." "Have you confronted him?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't know how deep this goes." Diane reached across the table and held my hand. "Then don't confront him yet." That was exactly what I had been thinking. She recommended that I speak with an independent attorney. So I did. Her name was Susan Miller. I brought every document I had. Susan spent almost 2 hours reviewing the records. Finally, she looked up. "Linda, I need to ask you something." "What?" "Did you knowingly authorize these transfers?" I shook my head. "I signed some investment paperwork because my husband told me it was necessary, but I didn't know he was moving money into a company he owned." Susan nodded. "Then stop signing anything." My hands were shaking. "Is my money gone?" She didn't give me false hope. "Some of it may still be recoverable, but we need to move carefully." "What do I do?" She leaned forward. "Protect the accounts you still control. Preserve every document. And don't tell your husband what you know." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because if he's hiding something, the moment he realizes you're investigating, he may start destroying evidence." I left that office terrified, but I also left with something I hadn't had before, a plan. From that day forward, I stopped looking at Richard as my husband. I started looking at him as someone whose actions I needed to understand. And then I discovered the part of the story that hurt more than the money. There was another woman. I found out accidentally. One evening, Richard left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. A message appeared on the screen. I wasn't trying to snoop, but I saw the name. Melissa. Then I saw the message preview. "I can't wait until we're finally free." My heart sank. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. I already knew. Richard wasn't just moving my retirement money. He was preparing for a life without me, and apparently, my retirement savings were helping finance that life. I sat there for several minutes staring at that laptop. Then I closed it. When Richard came home, I acted like I hadn't seen anything. He kissed me on the cheek. "How was your day?" I smiled. "Pretty good." He smiled back. That was the moment I understood something. He thought I was completely unaware, and I decided to let him keep thinking that. My attorney helped me find a forensic accountant. His name was Daniel. He reconstructed the transactions month by month. The more we uncovered, the worse it became. Richard had created his company and transferred money from several accounts. Some transfers were described as investments. Others were listed as loans. But the money wasn't being invested the way Richard had told me. Some had been used to pay personal debts. Some had gone toward a vehicle. Some had been transferred to other accounts. And some had been used for expenses connected to Melissa. Then Daniel found one transfer that changed everything. A large amount of money had been moved into an account connected to a property purchase in Florida. I recognized the address. It was the same Florida area Richard had been talking about for months. He had told me we might move there together after retirement. He had shown me pictures of houses. He had talked about beaches and warm weather. But now I understood. He wasn't planning our retirement. He was planning his escape. And he wanted to use my money to pay for it. I wanted to confront him immediately. I wanted to throw every document onto the kitchen table and demand an explanation. But Susan told me something I'll never forget. Don't give him the advantage of knowing what you know. So I went home. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day. I watched television beside him. I listened when he talked about Florida. And when he said, "I think we should sell the house next year," I simply smiled. Maybe. He looked surprised. Really? I nodded. Why not? He smiled. He thought everything was going according to plan. He didn't know that every transaction was being documented. Every lie was being preserved. Every financial record was being reviewed. Then Richard made his biggest mistake. He filed for divorce. He came home one Thursday evening with an envelope in his hand. He placed it on the kitchen table. "Linda, we need to talk." I looked at the envelope. "What is that?" "Divorce papers." For a moment, I felt nothing. Then he said, "I think it's better if we go our separate ways." I looked directly into his eyes. "Is that what you want?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." I nodded. "Okay." He looked surprised. "That's it?" I said. "What do you want me to do?" "I thought you'd fight." I gave him a small smile. "No." He had no idea what was coming. The divorce proceedings became complicated quickly. Richard's attorney tried to make the financial transfers look like legitimate investment decisions, but we had the records. The forensic accountant had reconstructed the transactions. The company registration showed Richard was the owner. The financial records showed where the money went. The property documents connected the money to Florida. And then there were the messages involving Melissa. Richard's story started falling apart piece by piece. He claimed he never intended to hide anything. Then Susan presented records showing that he had deliberately kept certain financial communications away from me. He claimed the money had been invested. Then the accountant showed exactly where the money had gone. He claimed the Florida property had nothing to do with him. Then documents showed payments connected to the property. Finally, he claimed he had never promised Melissa anything. Then the preserved messages were presented. Richard sat silently. For the first time in months, he looked afraid. After the hearing, he approached me. "Linda." I kept walking. "Linda, please." I stopped. He looked exhausted. "I made mistakes." I turned around. "Mistakes?" He lowered his voice. "I never meant for it to go this far." I stared at him. "You didn't accidentally create a company." He said nothing. "You didn't accidentally transfer my retirement money." Silence. "You didn't accidentally hide another woman." His eyes filled with tears. "Linda, I loved you." I shook my head. "No, Richard." I paused. "You loved what you thought I would never discover." Then I walked away. The legal process took time. It wasn't like television. There wasn't one dramatic courtroom scene where everything magically disappeared. There were documents, hearings, negotiations, financial reviews, legal fees, months of uncertainty. But eventually, the truth mattered. Some of the money was recovered. Other assets were divided through the legal process. Richard was held accountable for the financial misconduct connected to the transfers. The Florida property didn't become his escape. The woman he had planned to start a new life with didn't stay either. Once Melissa realized where the money had come from, she disappeared from Richard's life. And Richard lost far more than money. He lost the trust of his family. He lost his reputation. He lost the comfortable retirement he had imagined. And he lost the future he thought he could steal from me. As for me, I kept going. 6 months later, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee. The neighborhood was quiet. The birds were singing. The tomatoes in my garden were growing, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I had my own financial accounts, my own documents, my own plan. My sister helped me repaint the living room. I joined another book club. I started volunteering twice a week at the hospital where I had spent most of my career. And I learned something important. Retirement isn't about having millions of dollars. It's about having the freedom to decide what happens next. For 38 years, I had worked for other people. Then I spent months fighting someone who was supposed to be my partner. But Richard didn't destroy my retirement. He changed it. Before him, I thought retirement meant slowing down. After him, I realized retirement could mean starting over. One Sunday morning, Diane came over and sat beside me on the porch. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Happier." I smiled. "I am." She looked at me. "Do you ever regret trusting him?" I thought about it. "Yes." Then I shook my head. "No." She laughed. "That doesn't make any sense." "It does to me." I looked out at my backyard. If I hadn't trusted him, I might have never learned how strong I actually am. Diane smiled. "You really believe that?" "I do." I took another sip of coffee, and I learned something else. What? Never let someone convince you that getting older means becoming powerless. She nodded. I looked at the sunlight coming through the trees. At 64, I had lost a marriage. I had lost years of trust. I had lost money. But I had not lost myself. And that was the one thing Richard could never steal. People sometimes ask me what my revenge was. They expect me to say that I destroyed Richard. I didn't. I didn't ruin his life. I didn't scream at him. I didn't try to hurt him. My revenge was much simpler. I refused to let his betrayal define the rest of my life. He expected me to spend my retirement angry. He expected me to become bitter. He expected me to believe that 64 was too old to start again. Instead, I rebuilt. I learned how my finances worked. I became more independent. I traveled. I made new friends. I spent time with people who actually valued me. And 1 year after my retirement, I took a trip to the Grand Canyon. I stood there alone as the sun came up. The sky turned gold. The canyon stretched farther than I could see. And I realized something. For years, I had thought my husband was the person standing beside me at the end of my journey. But he wasn't. He was simply someone who walked beside me for part of the road. My journey was still mine, and it wasn't over, not even close. So if you're listening to my story and you're approaching retirement, remember this. Know where your money is. Read what you sign. Keep copies of your financial records. Don't give up control of your future just because you trust someone. And most importantly, never let anyone convince you that you're too old to protect yourself. Because sometimes the strongest chapter of your life begins after everyone else assumes your story is already finished. I thought retirement was supposed to be the end of my working life. Instead, it became the beginning of my real life. Richard thought he was stealing my future. He was wrong. He only gave me the courage to take it back.